I do believe that it's likely that the FCC's action will be overturned in the D.C. Circuit, and the principal reason it probably is quite far ahead of the other reasons in terms of likelihood of success is that the FCC has exceeded its statutory jurisdiction. It's relying on a theory of ancillary jurisdiction under which it says that it has jurisdiction under a broad provision of the Communications Act if it can relate its action to other provisions, specific provisions in the Communications Act. And, it seems to me that that's a real stretch here. And importantly, it tried that theory out about a year ago in the Comcast case, making some of the same arguments about ancillary jurisdiction, and the D.C. Circuit rejected it in that case. It didn't foreclose all attempts to come back and try again, but it looks to me like this case really is going to be rejected on the same basis as the earlier Comcast case. Well, it's made an attempt to link its action to certain provisions of the Communications Act. One, for example, is so-called Section 706, which has to do with the status of broadband deployment in the country and actions that the FCC may take if it makes negative findings concerning broadband deployment. But most observers think that that section itself didn't give the FCC independent authority really to take the type of actions that the FCC has taken in the net neutrality order, and that therefore the link between the two is just not sufficiently close to invoke this ancillary jurisdiction doctrine. This is a frequent basis of reviewing and actually invalidating orders of administrative agencies. The APA's requirement that the order not be arbitrary and capricious. And another way of thinking about that is that the FCC's decision has to be reasoned, and the courts often talk about reasoned decision making. In this case, I think a potential problem with the FCC's case that is quite serious is that it never really substantiates any evidence of market failure or consumer harm. A lot of the discussion is very anecdotal, and therefore, in terms of linking the findings, so-called findings of fact that courts look at, and trying to relate them to the remedy that the Commission has imposed, I think that's where there's a serious question about whether the FCC engaged in that type of reasoned decision-making that the courts look for. I think most observers would conclude that there wasn't evidence of any widespread problem. Again, there had been a few anecdotes. These had been addressed and fixed. And I think a key point here in terms of thinking about the evidence and the reasonableness of the FCC's decision is that it continually spoke of the purpose of its order trying to maintain the openness of the internet rather than trying to remedy a problem. You can find that in the order itself over and over again, and you can find it in the speeches by Chairman Janikowski that what we want to do here is maintain the openness of the internet. And I think when an agency does something this drastic, when its authority is questionable to begin with, then the courts are going to look to see whether there's a real problem that's being addressed as opposed to just trying to maintain the status quo. Well, just looking at it from a litigation point of view, I think because it's likely the FCC will lose on the statutory authority claim, it's probably then unlikely that the court will reach the constitutional claims, because it always defers constitutional claims until it's addressed the statutory claims. But that being said, I've argued for a long time that the net neutrality regulations violate the First Amendment, that they interfere with the free speech of the information providers. And I think if the issue were ever litigated, I feel confident that there's a pretty good chance that courts would agree that there's a First Amendment violation. Basically, you're telling the information providers that they have to carry some traffic that they would prefer not to carry on the one hand, or on the other hand that they're prohibited from carrying certain types of traffic. And you know, we're not talking about a case of broadcasting where you've got a spectrum issue generally in the same way that you had in the classic broadcast cases. So I think, you know, there is a real First Amendment issue.